All right, class. Today we are about to do our draw and label organelles activity. The first thing that I want you to do in the activity is open up your page in GoodNotes. When you open it in GoodNotes, it probably won't be rotated like this. It'll be sideways. This is just something I've already done. So in order to change it, you're going to press those three dots in the top right corner and press Rotate Page. So you'll rotate clockwise 90 degrees until it looks like this. Once you have your page looking like this, I'm going to just quickly switch back over to the directions. You for sure want, hopefully you've already watched this video tour of the cell. It's only 1 minute, guys, and that 1 minute will really help you understand what's happening in the cell. It's a refresher from Monday's video, which was much longer, that you took guided notes on. You want to use this slideshow to study, okay? I'm going to walk you through each of the organelles in this video, but this slideshow is what you want to come back to study, okay? So let's see if I can hit present on this device, and then we'll just press next, because I want to show you a really cool feature of cell membranes. So all of these little organelles, remember, they're like little organs. They all have specific functions in the cell, and we're going to learn about them as we draw them today. This right here is the cell's membrane. And what's really cool about the cell membrane is it's made by a phospholipid bilayer, and lipids are like little fats. If you've ever put oil in water, you know that oil stays separate from water. It is hydrophobic, which means that this whole wall of lipids here will keep the water or the intracellular fluids on the outside of the cell, and the fluids that belong on the inside of the cell stay on the inside of the cell. Now you can tell that this animal, or whatever this is that's got this cell, is dehydrated because it's forcing water molecules out of the cell through this channel. So it's trying to create balance. So there must be fewer water molecules on the outside of the cell than there are on the inside of the cell. So it's releasing some of those water molecules out to create an equal ratio from inside to outside. This person needs to drink water because you don't want to dehydrate the cells so much that they can't function properly. Moving on to our activity. So now we're going to take a quick look. Let me see how I can get out of this. There we go. And now we're going to go back to our GoodNotes page, and I'll help draw this stuff in for you. So the first thing I want you to write is cell membrane. Oops, how do I get that keyboard up here, guys? It's like the first time I've ever used it every time. Okay, cell. Text box. Oh, here it was. I'm going to delete that and try again. I promise I did this all day long, and here I am on the struggle bus. Just give me 1 second, please. Okay, here's a new one. We'll just leave that over there that says cell. We're going to type cell membrane right in the middle here. And I'm going to zoom in so I can draw an arrow from the word cell membrane to this little picture of the cell membrane. That's what's keeping the intracellular fluids out and the stuff that belongs inside the cell in. It's the gatekeeper. Now, plant cells have two layers. So we've got a plant wall on the very outside. So the cell membrane is actually this layer right here. Okay? All right, well, I already pulled the cat out of the bag. The surprise is here. Plant cells have cell walls in addition to cell membranes. And those walls provide structural support. You can see it's a rectangular shape. Most plant cells are rectangular in shape. And they also provide additional protection. So if you think about plants that have like toxins or poisons, they might have thinner plant cell walls because they don't need as much like physical protection as a plant that is not toxic or poisonous to bugs that might be eating it. Those that are not toxic might have thicker cell walls as a defense mechanism. So I'm going to draw an arrow to the cell wall here. And that rectangular shape helps these cells fit together nicely to form the shape of the structure, whether it's an onion or a carrot. We're going to be looking at lots of onions this year because they're cheap and easy to look at under the microscope. And you'll see that formation of the cells fitting nicely together, and they're very rectangular in shape. All right, so the next thing that I want you to consider is the cytoplasm. So let's look at cytoplasm. Remember that cytoplasm, cyto means cell and plasm means gel. So this is the cell gel. And we're going to use our highlighter tool. I'm going to choose green since it's a plant cell to draw that cytoplasm all within the cell. And I learned that if you hold down and don't release, then it doesn't do like dark layers, which is really nice. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just for you to study, so don't get caught up on perfection. That's the enemy of greatness. We want it to be nice enough for us to not be confused by what we see, but we also want to go home or whatever you're doing. I'm sure you've got other things you want to do after this. So I shaded that whole thing in because the cell is filled with cytoplasm. And the way I like to think about cytoplasm's job, which is to hold the organelles in a substance so that they can either stay in place or move through the substance to get to where they need to go in the cell, is if you didn't have the cytoplasm, I think about like a bag full of marbles. All the organelles would just be like stuck at the bottom, right? I'm going to do like a peach-colored cytoplasm on the animal cell, because we might think about this as like a skin cell, because we learned about mitosis in our last standard of how do cells reproduce. And we'll fill this in real quick. This is super satisfying to me. I know that word is like, I don't know if it's old or not trendy anymore, but best describes how I feel whenever I get to shade things in. Okay, I said we're not worried about protection, but all these extra outside the lines are going to bother me. So I'm just going to erase that real quick. So it looks like a 34-year-old did this and not a 5-year-old. Okay. So I'm going to draw an arrow from cytoplasm to inside the cell, so you can see that the cell gel, that cytoplasm, fills up the cell. The next thing we want to look at is a nucleus. So I'm going to draw my nucleus red. Okay. And I'm just going to take that eraser. I should have erased this on the inside. Alex had a tool called Klecky that made this very easy. So if you prefer Klecky instead of GoodNotes, you could use that. But for me, I'm just going to stick with what Kate taught me and draw a quick circle. If you click on that twice, you can see, yep, it's got the fill color option. So I'm going to draw a circle here, and it automatically fills it in for me. Bada bing, bada boom. That is real time saving. And then I'm going to draw another circle inside for the nucleolus, and we'll talk about what those parts do in a second. So I'm going to type nucleus in here so I don't forget what that is. We just drew the nucleus. And underneath it, I'm going to type nucleolus. Okay. And then underneath that, I'm going to type chromosomes. And you're like, wait, Mr. Schauf, we haven't drawn chromosomes. What do you mean? Okay, I'm going to slow down and explain what those mean now. Shucks. Okay, how did I do that? Yep. Okay, so the nucleus is this whole shape right here. So that's the nucleus, okay? Inside the nucleus contains our DNA. All right, so we've got DNA that I'm going to draw in the shape of chromosomes. So this animal cell is about to divide. And on this one, I'm just shaping in the double helix, right? That little 8 sign. So this plant cell is not about to divide. So the DNA, or those chromosomes, that's the neatly coiled DNA, and are in both nucleus. These are eukaryotic cells because they have a nucleus, If it didn't have a nucleus, that would be a prokaryotic cell. And what else to say about this? Oh, the nucleolus. That's kind of a big deal, huh? So the nucleolus is the manufacturer, it's the factory for making ribosomes. And I'll show you what a ribosome is here shortly. But for now, I'm going to have you draw an endoplasmic reticulum so that we can place the ribosome somewhere strategically. So my endoplasmic reticulum is like a transport route. It helps move proteins and lipids throughout the cell. It's like a switchback on a mountain, if you ever do any hiking. And on this endoplasmic reticulum, why don't we label that before we jump back to ribosome? So endoplasmic, endo means in, plasmic means gel, or cell, sorry, yeah, gel. So in the gel, so in the cytoplasm there, we've got a route. So I think of reticulum as route. Helps me remember that. And I'm going to put that underneath. And for short, you can say ER. So it's often called the ER because endoplasmic reticulum is a mouthful. So real quick, let's just draw some arrows to that endoplasmic reticulum. Boom. Boom. All right, so half of this endoplasmic reticulum is going to be the rough ER. So I'm going to add some ribosomes to make it rough. And in the rough ER is responsible for making proteins because all of those ribosomes make proteins, and they're housed on the ER, the rough ER, and they also float in cytoplasm. So I'm putting some ribosomes all throughout the cytoplasm. These are the places where proteins are made, and proteins are so important for all sorts of different functions in the cell, including making the cytoskeleton microfilaments, which we'll get to in a second. But let's go back to endoplasmic reticulum, okay? So the endoplasmic reticulum is usually near the nucleus because the nucleolus is going to make ribosomes, and those ribosomes are going to land on the endoplasmic reticulum, and that's what makes the rough ER rough. Notice that only half of that ER is rough and half of it is smooth. That's because the smooth ER makes lipids. All right? So lipids are those fats that are like that help us have the cell membrane. And we'll go ahead and jump over to the idea of cytoskeleton now. Like our skeleton gives us shape and keeps us upright and in the form that we're supposed to be in. Cells have skeletons too. Their skeletons are made of proteins that are made by ribosomes, and they help keep that cell open. So in addition to the cell gel, that cytoplasm, and what we'll learn about later, the vacuole, the cytoskeleton helps give the cell its shape. It maintains its shape. So I'm going to write down the word cytoplasm. Cytoskeleton. Gosh, so many new words. And I'm going to draw an arrow to the cytoskeleton microfilaments. In fact, my arrow looks like a microfilament, so that's kind of nice. All right. So we've got the cytoskeleton with the microfilaments made of proteins. Those proteins are made by the ribosomes, and those ribosomes are made by the nucleolus. Okay. Well, those ribosomes are busy making proteins, and sometimes they travel all the way through the ER, where lipids are also made, until they get to the Golgi body. So I'm going to draw a Golgi body, which is often pictured like a stack of pancakes. Is kind of what it reminds me of. For some reason, in all the digital renditions of cells that I've seen, the Golgi body is usually yellow. I don't know if there's any relationship to what's real or if that's just the color that everyone chooses to use, but I'm going to use it too. So the Golgi body receives the parts made by the endoplasmic reticulum, the lipids and the proteins. And just like a mechanic in a body shop, the Golgi body puts those parts together to make custom-built proteins that have lipids and carbohydrates attached that serve different functions in the cell. Some of those proteins are customized to become microfilaments. Some of those proteins become the DNA. There's all kinds of purposes for those proteins that have lipids and carbohydrates attached to them. All right, so I need to write down the word Golgi body. And since those are both at the top of my cell, I'm going to put it up here. Golgi body. And now I'm going to draw an arrow. Bada bing, bada boom. That's my Golgi body. It customizes proteins into useful structures for the cell. Okay, now we have made the parts. We've sent those parts to the Golgi body. How did those parts get from the Golgi body, or from the endoplasmic reticulum to the Golgi body? Sometimes they are sent in vesicles. So I'm going to make these vesicles yellow as well. They're going to be these yellow little circles that I think of like Amazon boxes. They've got different parts and exciting things that we all look forward to receiving in them. So they're basically shipments. Vesicles are little bubbles that ship proteins around to different parts of the cell. Sometimes the cell membrane even lets those vesicles in and out of the cell if different molecules need to leave the cell or enter the cell. Usually they're wrapped in a vesicle package. So I'm going to put the sciencey name for those Amazon boxes called vesicle right here. And of course, I'm going to draw an arrow so I don't forget. What is a vesicle? A vesicle is a package that carries proteins and other structures made by the Golgi body and the ER. Okay, so we've got vesicles. Now we get to do another little coloring exercise. I'm going to color the vacuole in a light blue. And the reason why I'm coloring it in light blue, even though the animal cell stores water as well, the vacuole's main job is to store materials, fluid materials, like water, okay? Now, if I don't water my plants, they get droopy because the cells inside are dehydrated. That vacuole is not full. Part of the job of this plant cell's vacuole is to create a turgor, which is like a pressure from the inside. If you think about filling that balloon up, it keeps the cell pushed open and that cell stays open up. But if it doesn't have the right amount of pressure, then and that vacuole is empty, then of course that cell is going to collapse some. So I'm going to make little small vacuoles over here because the main difference between a plant cell and an animal cell is the vacuoles. Animal cells have many small vacuoles, and plant cells has one big central vacuole, okay? So I'm going to write vacuoles down to remember that both cells have vacuoles, even though they are a little different. And I'm going to draw an arrow to them. Oops, I wish I would have drawn that in teal, actually. So I'm going to go look for teal since that would match. Yes, there it is. Okay. We only have a couple more organelles left. Thank God, right? That's a lot to remember. So the next organelles are specifically animal organelles. So I want to point out the centrioles, which we learned about in mitosis. So if you were paying attention in our last standard, centrioles are like the anchors of the cell. And if you remember, during mitosis, they form spindles out of those proteins that come out, and they will reach on to the chromosomes and pull those chromosomes apart as the cell's dividing so that the two new cells have identical DNA made by those chromosomes. But those centrioles are unique to animal cells. Plant cells do not have centrioles. So I am going to write centrioles over here on the animal cell side, and I'm going to draw an arrow to the centriole. They're anchors for those spindles to attach to so that the spindle fibers can pull the chromosomes apart. Okay, and we also have lysosomes. What color is a good color for lysosomes? We haven't done let's see. Why don't we do orange? Is that even going to show up on this peach? We'll find out. So lysosomes are another organelle. I'm just going to do kind of a big circle. Lysosomes are another organelle that are unique to animal cells. Most of the time, they're only found in animal cells, or mostly found in animal cells, although I did learn today, thanks to a student's great question, that they're also found in plant cells, rarely. Plants usually have an organelle called lactic vacuole. Maybe it's lactic vesicle. Can't remember. But it's a similar organelle that serves a similar purpose with a different name. It uses enzymes, which is what lysosomes do. They use chemicals to break down worn out cell parts. So animal cells have lysosomes that break down worn out cell parts. I think of Lysol when I think of lysosomes because they are cleaning up the cell. They're like the garbage collectors or recycling centers of the cell. Okay, so those are the animal-specific organelles, centrioles and lysosome. So far, the only thing specific to the plant cell is the cell wall. Now let's go back to the thing they have in common, which is a mitochondria, okay? So I'm going to make the mighty mitochondria, mighty like a Barbie, I guess, because pink is a color I haven't used yet. And I'm going to make this mitochondria like the shape of a jelly bean, because that's what it looks like in most pictures. Yesterday we learned that the more energy a cell requires, the more mitochondria it has. So I am going to draw several mitochondria in this cell, because let's say it's like one of you little athlete cells, or someone who's very active. Their muscle cells are going to need lots of energy, so we're going to have lots of mitochondria to supply those cells with the energy it needs, okay? So if you think about mitochondria as the powerhouses of the cell, you are on the right track. So mitochondria go through a process called cellular respiration to create ATP, adenine triphosphate energy, and that is a whole lot of stuff that you probably won't actually need to know anytime soon. But it's just so important that you realize that at a level you can't even see, there's so many organelles working together to keep you alive, which is pretty special and awesome. That happens in plant cells as well. So we'll make this have some mitochondria over here. And you're probably pulling back from your old memories of photosynthesis. You're like, but Mr. Schaaf, I thought plant cells get energy from the sun. You're right, they sure do. So I'm only going to do one mitochondria over here in the plant cells, because plant cells also have another way of making energy. That's called photosynthesis. So I'm going to draw a green colored jelly bean, because photosynthesis captures sunlight using these little pigments called chlorophyll inside an organelle that we are going to call and label chloroplast. And by we, I mean the whole scientific community. This is not unique to us. So plants have chloroplasts, which are like the converters. They convert sunlight energy into energy that the cell can use in a process called photosynthesis. And that is just a whole nother standard. This standard asks me to teach you all of the functions of very important organelles and explain the difference between plant cells and animal cells. And ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to say that we did it. We got through the list of organelles that we need to know. Please, please, please come to school every day, because next week we're going to be comparing our cheek cells to look at as animal cells with plant cells, with bacteria cells that we grew last week, with fungus that I've got in my yard. So we'll be comparing 4 different kingdoms of cells, so you can look at the difference underneath the microscope. So don't miss out. Come to class. All this will come together. Even though it feels like a lot, you got this, okay? When you have finished drawing and labeling all of your cell parts, you may submit this by pressing this box on the top left corner. It'll say export all. I'll show you that now. Export all. And then you'll say PDF, export again. I haven't done this from like my version of y'all's app, so I don't even know what it's going to look like for me to turn in work for myself, but we'll see. And after it exports, you're just gonna press submit. And I'm gonna cancel that now because the only button left is submit. And I think y'all can handle that on your end.